All right, so if everyone's ready, we can go ahead and get started. Um, I am Bonnie Lapwood. I am a Georgia Tech student and a member of the Georgia Tech YDSA, and I will be co-hosting tonight's town hall discussion along with two co-hosts.
Hey all, my name is Ryan Hahn. I am a third-year CS major at Georgia Tech. I'll be one of the other co-hosts, and I'm just glad to be here and hope we'll have some good discussion.
Hi, I'm Rada. I'm also she, they pronouns, and I'm also a Georgia Tech student, a second-year environmental engineering major. Really excited to see everyone come together today.
We really appreciate all of our panelists being here, and maybe we could just go through our list of panelists and each person could give a short introduction, who they are, what school they're coming from, and a little bit about themselves. Maybe we can start with you, Derek. It looks like you're next on the list.
Yeah, so my name is Derek Pacina. I'm the treasurer for YDSA at KSU. My pronouns are he, them, and I'm currently a senior, majoring in economics.
Thank you for being with us tonight. Dr. Edwards.
Hi, so I'm Alex, you can call me. I use she or they pronouns. I'm a Marion L. Britton postdoctoral fellow at Georgia Tech, which means that I teach first year composition, and am very excited to be here.
Thank you so much for being here tonight. Ethan from GSU.
Hey, howdy everybody. My name is Ethan Cosper. I'm from GSU. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm very excited to be here and speak on what is to be done tonight.
Thank you. And we also have, forgive me if I'm pronouncing this incorrectly, McEver.
Yeah, that's right. I'm McEver Dugan. I'm a fourth year environmental engineering student at UGA. I use she, her pronouns, and I am co-chair of the UGA YDSA.
Thank you so much for joining us. Olivia.
Hello there. My name is Olivia Brandt-Shenik. I use she, they pronouns, and I am a sequential art major at SCAD. I guess I founded the SCAD YDSA because we don't have one right now, so I'm trying to organize that so that we can get one started up there as well.
That's a great effort, and we would love to support that also. And Dr. Winfield.
Yeah, I ran unsuccessfully for the U.S. Senate as a Democrat in the special election. I'll be returning to UGA as a distinguished research professor. I've been teaching there since '82. I'm also a member of the United Campus Workers of Georgia.
Wonderful. I am also a UCW member, and we're very happy to have you with us here tonight. So thank you to all our panelists. We do have some questions prepared just for our discussion portion. And we can also take questions via the question feature. So if you, as an attendee, want to ask a question, feel free to put it in there, and we will get to it towards the second half or towards the end of our meeting tonight. So just to start off, we'd like to discuss just a general sense of if you felt safe being back on campus, if you have returned to campus, and giving kind of an overview of the general mood at everyone's respective universities. And just jump in if you would like to speak, and hopefully that will work out.
Yeah, personally, I've felt relatively safe because I've had all online classes and very rarely had to go to KSU campus. But when I did, About I'd say about 70% of people normally wore masks. KSU has done an effort to promote social distancing with seating. Not much with like people in the hallways and stuff like that. Because like a lot of classes are most like probably still are in class, but they've to promote social distancing with like um, common room couches and seats. They put like tape, like um, on every other cushion so that people can maintain like a 6 feet distance and stuff like that. So so far I haven't had any like instances where I feel like out, you know, the campus, like if I go to campus, I'm gonna get infected by COVID or anything so far, but it's just me.
Any other thoughts? Has anyone, sorry, got a dog that is barking over here. Has anyone not returned to campus for safety reasons?
I've not returned to campus. I'm also not employed currently. I'm on unpaid leave, but I have no great desire. I did sneak into my office on one occasion late at night to get some books and so forth. But basically, as we all know, there's no systematic testing of everyone on campus. UGA is reported by the New York Times of having close to 5,000 people who've become infected with COVID. Since there isn't any real universal testing, it's probably much more than that. I'm not around campus to be spying on whether people are engaging in social distancing or wearing masks, but it's quite obvious around town in Athens that masses of students are not doing that at all. They're packing the bars, they're packing indoor spaces, they're commonly not wearing masks or showing social distancing. And since the university, and I should say the entire state, has been completely derelict in not having comprehensive testing of everyone, students and staff, before they can come back to campus, let alone testing them on at least a weekly basis, we have to assume that the 5,000 infections at UGA are just the tip of the iceberg. And we know that all of the infections are increasing. And I think you people who are Georgia Tech should know from your scientific backgrounds that we're dealing with something that's airborne. So being 6 feet away from someone does not protect you. Wearing a mask does not sufficiently protect you either. These are part of measures that can be taken, but much more has to be. And I have to say that I know that faculty and staff have been completely ignored in the policy decisions on how the university has come back to various kinds of teaching. And as we all know, there is a complete absence of workplace democracy in the state university system. The right to work laws prohibit collective bargaining and going on strike. And they certainly don't allow there to be any employees on the Board of Regents, let alone on school boards. So I think all these things have to be changed if we're going to think of the university operating in a safe way. It's putting not so much students, but I think faculty and staff and the families and fellow citizens of everyone in considerable danger. And we know things are completely out of hand in America at large and in the state of Georgia.
I haven't been back on campus either at Georgia Tech. I have a remote work agreement with Georgia Tech granted through HR for a medical condition so that I don't have to be on campus. That was hard fought for me to even get that. And so I teach my 3 classes online. And I have a lot of students who are actually not back in Atlanta even. So this message we keep hearing about how students are clamoring for more in-person classes, I don't buy that that's what the message actually is, because I know that I have students who say like, I don't feel safe and I don't want to be there, and they're very grateful to have the ability to take my class from India and China and New Jersey and California. So Yeah. Although I have snuck back on campus to get books from my office. I think that's a universal professorial experience. What I have seen of Georgia Tech students seems to be, the campus actually seems pretty empty. The like 2 times that I've been through, and I have seen, I would say probably 90% of students that I saw wearing masks, although I didn't see many. But you know, we've recorded 1,500 cases, so I know that somewhere they're not taking the safety measures, and cases are spreading. So.
Yeah, and also to bounce off the discussion about like in-person versus online and like faculty ownership of their own schedules. I know at UGA they're requiring professors, unless they have like one of those medical conditions, to teach at least one in-person class a week, which completely takes the decision-making and safety away from the choice of the professors and the students who are trying to stay distanced and stay safe, which definitely decreases the amount that I feel comfortable going to campus, especially with issues. And like, I personally don't have like meal plan, or I'm in the dorms, and that's where a lot of the cases are spreading. You hear of entire floors getting it at once because they're all publicly shared bathrooms per floor, which is completely inefficient system, which I can't imagine how unsafe that would feel as well, just to be in there with everyone. So yeah, anyway, that's my 2 cents. It's sometimes easier to feel safe when you're going to campus just for a class, because the actual class is in person and like you're fairly distanced. They limit the people per room, and most people are wearing a mask. But outside of the actual class, in people's own extracurriculars, going out downtown at bars, sorority houses and fraternities, all of that is completely unregulated, and the university knows what's going on, and there hasn't been much effort to stop.
Yeah.
And I have a question I could ask to all of you, is that, you know, the testing is very haphazard, but nonetheless, there are thousands and thousands of cases cropping up. If they were doing things right, the state and the university would be immediately contact tracing anyone who tests positive and having rigorous quarantining in the proper facilities of anyone who tests positive or has been exposed. Now, have any of you experienced any sign of contact tracing occurring among your fellow students or employees, or any kind of quarantining that is being systematically carried out?
Well, at SCAD, we do have like a daily health screening, but it's only required if we want to go into facilities. So people don't have to like screen necessarily ever. And all they really do is temperature check you at the booths. And like, I don't know, I think that SCAD has a lot of problems that have to do with mental health, especially, and they've been really, really poor in that aspect. They've separated us, and they've made it so that it's 1 person per dorm, and then we have no visitors, things like that. But you have to, at the same time, like follow up with students to make sure that they're like doing well mentally, that they're processing the things that they need to be processing correctly. There needs to be extra support there that SCAD students simply aren't getting. There's a real lack of mental health care at SCAD. So my school, I'm not really sure about you guys, but often a lot of their official things that they put up are very much facades, where they have a really, really professional front, but there's a real lack of care at the end of the day. And that's kind of how our COVID has been. It's very show-offy, where you know, they have daily health screenings and stuff, but you find out later that students really aren't required to do it. There's only a call center for if you actually like are positive. They don't have any information listed for help to seek. That's the only thing that you can get is a call number. So it's very inefficient and like very superficial.
So to bounce off of that, here at Georgia State, one thing that I see as a flaw within the system is we have testing and so on, but the contradiction within that is that you can only receive free on-campus testing if you also live on campus in the dorms. And as you know, Georgia State has over 50,000 people, and the majority of which are commuters who come to the college and do it all that. With our rec center being completely open, I'm a part of our outdoor recreation center, which is run completely almost full throttle. There has been safety precautions taken with COVID, but we are still running out equipment. We're still going on trips. We're still doing all of these things. As a worker, I kind of have to do that, or else I quit and then I don't have a job, right? But there is a little bit of a safe thing with that, where if you are exposed to COVID or you think you have symptoms, you have to quarantine yourself for either 10 days after you get tested negative on a COVID test. But the contradiction with what I was saying earlier is that if you don't live on campus, you got to go pay for the test or go somewhere else for it. So what we're seeing is a lot of, these unnecessary hoops that you have to jump through in order to make sure that you're protecting yourself along with everyone else around you, which ultimately leads to a spiral of cases.
Can I ask you a question about what you just spoke about?
Absolutely.
You mentioned how people who tested positive are supposed to go into quarantine. Now, is there any contact tracing of those who test positive? And is there any monitoring of the quarantining of those who are supposed to go under quarantine? And how do they do that if they're living on campus? What facilities are available to them?
Exactly. That's from what I understand, they only get an email saying you can't come into work. And to my understanding, there's no extent of extra looking into, are you quarantining by yourself in your own room and like keeping everyone else around you safe? That isn't like a precaution that's being taken. Along with that, you could come into work one day and, you might have had it. We don't know. Because all we're doing is similar to what I hear at SCAD is you have this fancy little font board that has all the symptoms and you walk in and you say, typically, no, I don't have any of those. Can you take my temperature? And they do your temperature, and then you get to go do whatever play thing you want in the rec center, which is running almost completely wide open. Because I have to walk through there for work, we have 30 to 50 people in there at a time, which they're wearing masks, but having that influx of people in a small area to where everyone's breathing heavily, obviously, that's getting the air to fluctuate and all these particles disperse. People can get infected very easily that way.
It's also bad in KSU because, from what I've heard, for students, workers, when their teacher or their or the manager or whatever had COVID, they left, they self-quarantined, but the school or the department did not contact them, telling them that they had COVID. So KSU actively hides the fact that some of their faculty actually gets COVID. And I honestly doubt they even do contact tracing for that matter.
Yeah, the hiding COVID is a big thing at UGA too, because UGA specifically has said that they will not contact professors, and that professors cannot tell students if anyone in their class got COVID, even if they don't say a name or anything. So there's no transparency in knowing you're going to class in the same room every day with someone that had it recently, or there's no transparency, and they're very deliberately hiding that with pretending that it was some academic privacy law, but which has nothing to do with academics and anonymous. So it's just been wild how little control any of the classrooms have and how much UGA is actively trying to hide everything.
That seems to have come, I suspect, directly from the university system of Georgia, because initially our guidelines at Georgia Tech were that we could let students in our classes know that someone had COVID after the contact tracing had been finished. That's what we were told. And then right before the fall semester started, there was an update to that with no, like, you know, they didn't say why, what the change, like what motivated the change, but suddenly it became, don't announce to your classes that someone has tested positive for COVID. And they're hiding behind that FERPA, the federal, I don't know what it stands for, but it's the education privacy law, basically, that says that, for example, I can't post a student's grades publicly so that like everyone would know what their grades are. And that's, you know, a very important privacy law, but USG as a whole is using it as a shield to get away with being able to suppress information about COVID, which is a problem.
I think schools really benefit off of a lack of information, right? It seems like from what I'm hearing all across the board that we're all having the same problems here with schools just not being transparent. And SCAD is having the same problems. I was doing research for this over the past few days just to read up on some of their policies, and they completely contradict themselves all the time. On the website, they'll say that students will have a choice to do in-person classes next semester, or they can do online. But really, when you go on our apps, on the student personalized apps, it lets you know that your classes will be in person, and if you don't schedule them in person, you won't be eligible for housing. And if you want to apply for housing and you want to do virtual, they will automatically change your schedule to be in person right now. So they're like actively lying and contradicting themselves.
This inability to find information is prevalent at Georgia State as well. Like you, I was trying to do research of like, oh, how many cases do we have here at Georgia State and so on, and like faculty and staff, and there's nothing at all.
No
concerning. Exactly. Nothing at all. All that you can find is like, here are our plans going forward. We're going to try to continually maximize how many people we can have on campus, how many on-campus classes we can run, and maximize our profits while also putting the public health and safety of our students at risk. Stuff like that. So one thing that I would like to, you know, demand of the USG and Georgia State is how many people are getting affected? Can we have easy access to that? How do we do this? Because I know that my friends here at Georgia Tech have something of the nature. It says like, oh, these are people who have been affected. These are the numbers. Something like that is incredibly beneficial to a student. And not only that, a faculty member, a worker, and someone just observing for statistical purposes.
Another side of things that hasn't been brought up, which affects employees and includes, I think also any student who's working on campus or graduate students, is the issue of paid leave. Because after all, let's say you have to quarantine. You know, you have to be able to survive. You also should be guaranteed to have your job waiting for you when you're healthy. You also face family members, you know, who may have to quarantine, and it may be that you're a caretaker for them. It could be children or others. And that means, you know, you need to have paid family leave and be allowed to do it. And, you know, none of this is provided for employees at the university system, let alone any reasonable amount of paid sick leave that would be sufficient. So I think that's part of it. The other thing is what's happening in the public schools. In Athens, where I live, the public schools have until recently been operating remotely. And that's, you know, a big crisis for people where both parents or one parent, a single parent, is working and there is no affordable daycare. You know, what are they supposed to do with kids at home, many who are very young? You know, so we also have to think about that whole issue of safe and affordable, if not free, public childcare, as well as elder care.
And I really don't understand why we seem to be the only country in the first world considering this, because other countries have socialized, childcare for circumstances exactly like this. So.
So you brought up an interesting point, Dr. Winfield, about how administrations have been handling workers' safety and workers' rights. Another thing that should be considered along with paid leave is hazard pay. I know, Ethan, you mentioned you're a student employee, and you're being put into, you're being exposed as part of your job. Would you like to comment on that, or does anyone else have any comments on the hazardous nature of working on campus?
The only thing I do have to say about that is that, to my knowledge, this paid leave we're talking about is non-existent for people in my area at which we work, right? I have a coworker who was exposed and he had to self-quarantine. To my information of what I talked to him preparing for this, he was not paid any leave to do such, to protect himself along with us. And if the bills didn't get paid, I guess it wasn't the university's problem. So getting on hazard pay, yes, is incredibly important because you have people who come in. The only thing that stands between you and apparently knowing if someone has COVID is a little thermometer. So obviously, this is going to increase the anxiety at which I have when I go to work. And also the stress level of like, am I safe? Am I being taken care of? And so on and so on.
I think another big problem here is that there's very little protection like in the state of Georgia, period. As Dr. Winfield mentioned, we're a right to work state. And so we're incredibly hampered in our ability to collectively bargain. It's illegal. But also even just to enjoy, we can't enjoy really the benefits of unionization in the way that a lot of other states can. One place this has played out for us is that if you are an employee, I don't know if this counts for student employees. I don't think that it does because students have to be have health insurance through the school in a different way. But if you're employed by USG, you have a 365-day probationary period for your benefits, which means that if you get sick and you have to take leave, extended leave, during that first year of your employment, you actually they won't pay you anymore, and they won't pay for your health insurance. So you have to figure out how to pay out of pocket to maintain your health coverage. And so we have, my postdoctoral program is like a 3-year term. So every year we have a new set of postdocs who are coming in to teach at Georgia Tech. And this year is incredibly scary because if any of those kids get sick, they're adults, they're my coworkers, but if any of them get sick, then they can't take leave or they'll be booted from USG's benefits with no protection for them at all. And so we've tried to think about how to protect those people. How do you sort of work around if their classes need to be covered or something like that, so that maybe the system doesn't know necessarily that has happened. And luckily none of them have gotten sick yet. But it's a really anxiety inducing, I know, for our first year postdocs to be counting down the days until they're actually safe with their health insurance and their benefits.
I mean, we should keep in mind that, the problem you're speaking about would not exist if we separated health insurance coverage from employment. And virtually every country in the world has done that. Obviously, some fund them to greater or lesser degrees, but they've done it in a way so that you don't have to worry if you're not employed or you lose your job and so forth. You always will be covered by health insurance. And that needs to be done here. And that goes, of course, beyond our predicament. But I think it's indicative of all sorts of policies that really should be done at a national level that would have a huge impact in remedying the crises we're facing here and now, at all the different schools we're inhabiting.
Yeah, example of like how terrible it is that our insurance is tied to our employment. For KSU, recently when the school board was planning on doing 14% cuts for higher education. Well, they initially wanted to do 40% cuts, but then after some pushback, went down to 11%. So schools were able not to cut like billions of dollars off of their budget for for basic operations and stuff like that. But KSU went with the 14% plan and then laid off like initially about 24 workers, and then later on they furloughed about 50. Those 24 and 50 workers, they all lost their health insurance. They didn't get any termination compensation or anything, and they did this like literally June of this year, in like the height of the pandemic, and they still haven't got anything so far. And most of these workers have been like, I think about half of them were women. More than half was making below 50K a year. Most of them were, well, 20% of them are Black too. Like, and the local UCW here at KSU they've been going out for them. They've been doing petitions. They've been doing rallies for them. But KSU still, they're trying to reverse the layoffs too that happened to these workers. But Wayne has not responded directly at all so far as I know.
Thank you for bringing that up, Derek. I think we've seen cuts across USG schools. We've seen layoffs, and we've seen COVID used as an excuse for these austerity measures that are put into place and that really are extremely harmful to employees as we are in a pandemic. And as you point out, they lose their health insurance. Would anyone else like to speak on austerity measures at their campuses?
Our school very soon went into a hiring freeze, and I think others did as well. And I know that talking with other student workers and someone who just left working from dining services and still knows a lot of people there, it's severely understaffed because a lot of people left with no additional hiring. So their workload has increased, not just because of the understaffing, but also because additional positions need to be taken for COVID. So for example, they need a host at the beginning, people to do Grubhub orders now, less self-serve, so there's more people needed. And so all of this combined with like almost 2/3 of the staff, if that, has led to serious stress across all of these employees that simply don't have the capacity to handle what they're being asked to. So not only do we not have hazard pay, not only is it more dangerous for employees, but it's also just a lot more difficult for them to just do their job.
Can I just add one thing to that issue about how employees are being stuck with more work? We are the only nation in the so-called developed world that allows mandatory overtime. It's prohibited in every other nation. So in a situation where you have an employer, be it public or private, that is, let's say, downsizing in one way or another, but having to have the same amount of work performed by a smaller number of workers, they can require them to work overtime. And that is known not only to obviously screw up our family lives, our political involvements, and anything else you want to do when you're not working. It also does increase stress. It is known to increase the amount of injuries on the job. It's bad for everyone's health and not necessarily good for the performance of work.
I just wanted to say that I was trying to find information on the wages for security officers around SCAD, who are the main ones dealing with people on a daily basis. interacting with every single person who comes into any SCAD facility. And they're only getting paid $10 an hour. So that's not a livable wage in Georgia. I can't even find any information if they get benefits or anything like that. But it's really sad that they're putting people in the most vulnerable position in the school in such harm's way. And like, from what I'm seeing, they're overworked, understaffed like the other schools, and they're not receiving any extra help at all.
To touch on that, just from my experience at Georgia State working in our outdoor services, we don't receive any benefits either. Get no health coverage or anything. I get paid roughly $8 an hour to do my job, and we can't work over 20 hours a week. So obviously what we're talking about with, even if I had health benefits, which I don't, this being tied to work is strenuous, of course, because now you're worried about, oh, if I get sick and lose my job, then where do I go from there, and so on. And not only that, someone like me who doesn't have health care to begin with in this hazardous scenario, also lacking hazard pay to be able to cover myself if I do become affected and require treatment of the nature while making $8 an hour, puts me in a tough situation at which I feel like is not a necessity for someone to go through. There are better ways to deal with these problems that we see, and we can not only have to theorize about this, but look around the world to see how other countries are already doing these things that we're talking about, already protecting their workers to go through such extremities.
And it's not like the schools that we go to don't have the money to implement these things, right? They, like I said earlier, they profit off of us not knowing and not looking into it.
In extreme
Yeah,
case, sorry, in extreme case, in many of our campuses, where you have an organization raking in overall hundreds of millions of dollars using completely unpaid labor, that is now more and more dangerous. It's always dangerous. I'm speaking about varsity athletes, particularly in football programs. And as you all know, the football programs, they decided to carry on as usual, not to postpone the season until the spring, which they could have done, but to carry on right now. And of course, they don't pay their so-called student athletes. And we're doing it now in a condition where obviously they're at risk, not only for having brain injuries that go along with playing football, but coming down with COVID. And we all know there's a disproportionate number of African Americans whose communities are disproportionately vulnerable to COVID. And they're being brought back to campus. They're not being put in a bubble, like the NBA was. They're there among students, and they're not only having themselves be put in danger, but their families, their communities, and so forth. They should definitely be paid hazard pay, I would say. They should have been being paid hazard pay all along, given how dangerous football is. But now, more than ever, they need hazard pay. And the season shouldn't be going on as it is.
So we've kind of touched on this at several points, but general question, why do these university campuses want to stay open? What are some of the motivations that we're looking at here?
I can start off with that. I did some research into SCAD businesses, and we are a nonprofit, right? So that means we get subsidies for housing. And so the money that they can collect from housing alone pays for most of the school's expenses, right? So keeping us on housing lets them pocket like a lot of the money that should be going back to us. And now they're locking students on campus as well, basically, right? With this whole thing of we're going to automatically change your schedule. So that's how they're profiting. This money is not being given to students. It's not being given to their workers. It's ultimately being pocketed by the higher ups. And they're profiting off of their nonprofit label as well. So it's pretty disgusting.
Housing is a huge, huge motivator in these campuses deciding to be open. Olivia, you're absolutely right. A Georgia Tech student who I actually think might be active in YDSA at Tech, earlier this year did an open records request and found that there was a public-private partnership between USG and a company called Corvias, and that Corvias had actually issued this memo that told them, I believe it was directed specifically at Georgia State, but it covered all the schools that had Corvias deals, which was like 9 out of the 26 in the USG system, that Corvias claimed under the terms of their contract that the schools could not do anything to discourage students from coming to campus because it would put Corvias out of money. And so even on, I think, campuses that don't have a contract with Corvias or with another private company who's managing their housing, there's still the need to, like Olivia said, lock students into this system, right? It's the company town. You can't make money off of students if you don't have them in the dorms, have them eating overpriced food in the dining halls, have them buying stuff in the bookstore, have them, spending money in all of the various ways that they spend money locked into these campuses, attending sporting events, right? All of that stuff is a huge motivator in this refusal to acknowledge how much risk you put students and community members in when you get them onto the campuses. They have to make that money.
I just wanted to note as well that a lot of we have a lot of international students in Atlanta in general, but especially at SCAD, and their visas are at risk, right? If they don't maintain their student status. And that is like a huge issue right now, and there's a lot of international students at SCAD talking about that. So I think that's also something that we should be concerned about, because there's people who may not even be able to stay in this country,
they pay full tuition.
Yeah.
As international students, they can't get grants and things like that, so they are paying out of pocket the entire dollar amount.
Yes, and it can get, especially for art school, it can get to huge amounts of money. And we're on a quarterly system, right? So we have 4 quarters per year. So it's a lot. It's a lot.
There's another money consideration that maybe is not as vile as what you're describing, which was told to me by a friend of mine who also is a sort of associate dean at UGA. And that is, on his account, the administration was worried about having teaching go completely online because they feared that that would mean that a certain number of students would decide they don't want to remain enrolled for the time being, because obviously online classes is not as great a situation as having normal classes and the whole experience of being on campus, et cetera. So they were afraid that the enrollment would diminish, and they get funded by the state according to how many students enroll. So they were concerned also about that factor. But that also raises the issue of, providing funding for the university that it can function, that it doesn't have to furlough people, no matter what these other circumstances are. And although it may be true, as I think some of you were pointing out, that the university system has a lot of funds to deal with. On the other hand, I think state budgets are hurting because of the economic downturn that's been brought on by the mismanagement of the pandemic. And, well, the federal government has many more resources and fiscal flexibility. It could ensure that public universities and public schools could make it through this crisis, even if enrollments were to go down. But that's a question of our national policymakers, coming to the plate and doing what's right.
Yeah, so I have a question about, I guess, the whole enrollment numbers. So I know, at least for one thing, Georgia Tech at least kind of internally showed, or at least attempted to kind of make a mirage of showing that there was this concern for enrollment regarding their budget and stuff, and just in regards to just lowered revenue. I guess, how do we combat that narrative?
I mean, I think to some degree there is an element of truth in it. I mean, if the funding for public universities, I know it depends on enrollment. Of course, for private universities, it does depend upon students being there to pay tuition, but they can still pay tuition if they're doing things remotely. So that may not, necessarily be that big a factor. But then it is a question of, how are we going to fund our public universities? I think we all know, or at least I know because I've been in this racket for a long time, that the amount of state funding as a portion of the operating expenses of our public universities has gone down significantly over the years. And as a result, they've had to increase student fees, bring in all sorts of private subcontractors, try to establish various kinds of endowments and the like. All this reflects the fact, and another big factor that I've noticed that you may not be aware of, and that is despite the fact that in the last 40 years, the state enrollment of students has vastly increased. I mean, at UGA, it's almost doubled. The number of tenured faculty has not increased at all. So what's happened? More and more of the teaching, and now at least half the teaching at UGA, is not done by tenured professors. It's done by adjunct people or by graduate students. And of course, the adjunct professors, well, I shouldn't say professors, the adjunct instructors and the graduate students are being paid poverty wages for this. And I think that all has to do with the way in which we are not sufficiently publicly funding these institutions. And that requires a big change in public policy regarding education.
It's classic disaster capitalism. If you know Naomi Klein's work at all, she talks about this kind of like, you take a disaster and in the moment where everyone is reeling from the shock and awe of it, you can impose austerity measures and people have very little agency or wherewithal to fight back against that. And so part of the budgetary, like the state funding concerns here have to do with the 2008 recession. And when schools, USG lost so much in terms of investments, and that the state budget took such a hit. That's when they, for example, at UGA, I did my PhD at UGA, so I'm very familiar with it. They imposed this new special student fee that was only supposed to last for a year, right? And it's astronomically expensive. I think you end up, as a graduate student, I was paid in the range of $14,000 a year, and then I paid over $1,000 back in fees, and that didn't include what I had to pay for my my mandatory health insurance. But that fee was only supposed to be in effect for about a year, and every year that's gone by, the Board of Regents has declined to remove that fee, and so they use these disasters or emergencies or hits to the budget or fears of lower enrollment as an excuse to defund in all of these various ways. And then once you get down, right, once you take a budget and you take it down, then it's like, oh, well, we can't put more money into that budget. We don't have that money. And so it just is a cascading effect of continuing to lower the priority of funneling needed funds into a system that is financially stressed.
So we have some questions from some of the audience members. Jake, one of our YDSA GT members, asked, he said, it seems like there's this disconnect between the severity of the pandemic in terms of like record cases and plans to return to normal. How are universities normalizing the dangers of returning, and how can we push back against this?
So for
one of the main ways that I've seen them normalizing it is shifting the blame to students, and like things that people are doing outside of campus, saying that, you were doing everything right, it's not us, it's just that students aren't being careful enough. And, as long as like they do their stuff, then we'll be fine. We can go ahead and go back to normal, which is completely wrong. I mean, people are going to want to do things outside of their classes. That's how it is. And so that understanding and like the disconnect between knowing what people are actually going to do and saying that there is this return to normal, saying that it is possible to have in-person classes and making that mandatory is, yeah, like you said, completely disconnected. And I just think the main way to push back on it is things like this, making sure we're still talking about it and still making sure we know what the actual policies are, understanding what the administrators are saying and what they aren't saying, even more importantly. So just keeping aware and keeping the discussion open and never letting them, get away with stuff like that without mentioning it.
I think organization is key, like just making sure that we are talking to the communities around us and making sure to spread correct information, because there's so much misinformation going around. It's basically commonplace at this point, right? So I think that building up a coalition could be really, really beneficial, and just trying to talk to as many community members as you possibly can.
I think it's very important that as you were suggesting, that we build coalitions. I mean, most of you are students. Some of you are faculty or staff, as I am. But you have the faculty and staff who are by no means united. There is, as you know, this effort to unionize all employees in the state system. And although it remains an organization that has relatively few members, it's growing. But I think students on the one hand, faculty and staff on the other, need to organize and organize around the issues affecting us regarding the pandemic, and also to recognize it's affecting our local communities. Because every university that resumes, or every branch of the state system that resumes in-person instruction is basically a super spreader, effectively. Not necessarily because things on campus may not be controlled to some degree, but because also what goes on off campus is relatively uncontrolled, given the fact that our state is imposing very few requirements on businesses, bars, and so forth. So I think one has to recognize that the local communities are very concerned about what's going on, because they are being affected. You can have in-person schooling on university campuses where the students are much more capable of doing online learning than elementary students. But because you allow in-person studying to go on campuses that end up spreading the contagion into communities to a sufficient degree that schools cannot take place in person, you're really doing something damaging to the education of younger people who really don't have the means to operate online, especially when not everyone has broadband, nor do people have the money to buy the devices to use broadband or pay for it. So I think one has to think about all of these kind of connections. And then there's a lot of strength that we can draw upon.
We have to be really deliberate with our words as well, too, because so often things are sugar-coated, right? Like, we need to be honest about what these people are doing. These people are actively like contributing to the deaths of the people around them, right? And it's not something that we can be soft on, because people are dying, right? Like, these policies or lack thereof are actively killing people. Maybe not even people who go to our school necessarily or work at our school, but certainly people around us. And it's just really worrying that people don't want to use harsh language in this, when really, like, what's being done is far worse than anything we could say,
That's a really good point. And I think that kind of leads into Cameron's question. Cameron, also a YDSA Georgia Tech member. One of the things that has been an impact of COVID is the mental health impact. People, like you say, people around us in our communities are dying, are getting sick, and this has had a huge effect on people's mental health. And we've heard from USG that part of their justification for reopening in spring is that it's going to improve students' mental health. This is allegedly based on a survey where students reported having mental health issues, and they also reported wanting to go back to class. But it seems like it was probably willfully misinterpreted to mean that students want to go back to class during the pandemic. So let's talk about mental health. What has been impacting your mental health, your fellow classmates' mental health, your students' mental health, and how does this relate to plans to reopen in the spring?
Well, I can start off really quick because that's been my main concern with my school right now. SCAD has really, really alarming suicide rates even outside of a pandemic, right? It's a huge problem at our school. So they implemented this program called Be Well, which is their version of a mental health service for students and just health in general. And it's completely lacking, right? There's very little attention given to people, especially right now. They sometimes won't even get back to students, especially I've had students of color even tell me that they've had instances where they were told by Be Well that they actually don't provide the services that they do. So overall, like, our mental health care in SCAD is very, very lackluster and very, very poor. So it did not get much better during quarantine. It was, they didn't really provide any resources for students to kind of get to know one another, maybe like group chats or maybe just linking like a Facebook group or something to all students to join in case they want to meet other students. There was nothing like that provided. There was no mental health services really for, or no easy way to get them, I should say, in a lot of these circumstances. And often the scheduling is so poor at our school that often students who are overseas, international students, will be scheduled for classes that are at normal times here, right? But are at 3 or 4 a.m. for them. So I am sure that that does not help their mental health at all. And I can certainly see it with my classmates. The international students, I know that they're so talented and they're amazing and they have great work to offer, but I can tell how exhausted many of them are and how little support that they're getting. And you can see it reflected in a lot of their work because there's literally like no support for these people, especially international students. So.
Yeah, to touch on that, I will say one thing. So at Georgia State, one thing that is definitely degrading my mental health is the fact that I'm attending all these online classes and receiving that, but I'm still paying full price for the class itself at no reductionized rate. That is still affecting me drastically, being someone who has to pay for college on their own and making, as we said earlier, poverty wages at a student employee center. So this inability to even accommodate me in any sense of form for taking an online class, still participating and still saying, no, you're paying the full price. You're also paying for services at the university at which you're not going to use, like the rec center, like all of this other bus transportation and so on. That hurts, along with the fact that our counseling system doesn't even touch back or hasn't touched back out to me. I'll speak from a personal anecdotal level. I've tried to reach out, received no even attempt to come back to me. And it's also pretty scary knowing that I have to go into work every day when there, I think it was yesterday, which we almost eclipsed 200,000 cases nationwide in America. So a lot of this, and still being demanded and asked as a, you know, a UCW worker and stuff of that nature, you have to come in, you have to do schoolwork, regardless of all the it's going around you. If your professor's also saying, yes, this is scary times, but you're still turning in the work no matter what. And if it's 2 minutes or 3 minutes late, that's too bad, that's a 0. So a lot of mental health comes from not only the price at which we have to participate in the system, which is not at the full level of which we are, why would we pay full price for an online system as opposed to the in-person lesson training, right? It's an inherent contradiction to me, along with all of the health risk I'm exposing myself to as well, for no hazard pay, no benefits, only really to be there for experience and a hope that I get a career in the outdoor center eventually one day.
Yeah, to add to that, that's okay. Yeah, to add to that, I'm not sure about for y'all school systems, but like for KSU, for online classes, we actually have to pay more than regular online classes. Like we get like a $300 special institution fee for like if we even have like one online class in our schedule. So yeah, that's really tough for people that have to pay like either out of pocket or have no loans. Like for example, me, I took 2 jobs so I can pay for my housing, and like, you know, it's pretty tough. I got 2 jobs, I got 4 online classes, and like it's not like that. It's not really like my hardest semester in terms of like workload or difficulty, but it's like the constant week by week doing the same thing. Got to turn discussion board over discussion board. You got to study quiz over quiz and stuff like that. It's like more of like burnout than actual stress. Like I'm just personally just like tired of school in general. Like if I wasn't graduating soon, I'll just take a skip year already, because like it's just really tough. And like I know that a lot of people have actually been what's it called again, been, you know, dropping on their classes. Like thank God that KSU has extended their withdrawal period by a month. It ended like around the 12th of November, I think. Thank God it did that, because a lot of people, they were not doing good in the class at all. Like that's why I believe that what all school systems should have adopted was like a pass-fail opt-in system, where so you don't really have to worry about your GPA that much. Because like personally, I don't care about GPA anymore, because like I'm just like tired. My work quality is like degraded so much. Like, I wish they just did a pass-fail system, and like we should can opt in. So like some people, if they want to increase their GPA, they can try, and if others just didn't care, just want to pass, that's fine too. And probably just remove GPA requirements for like future classes they need for next semester or something like that, because it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I want to jump in and kind of offer a faculty perspective here. I think one of the things that's really frustrating is that because schools, particularly in Georgia, have pushed ahead with this like need to reopen, they've misallocated money in a lot of ways. And so all these extra, you know, hygiene theater things, the temperature screenings where they have to pay to staff the booth, to taking your temperature doesn't tell you anything. Georgia Tech's reopening plan that they submitted to the University System of Georgia, all 26 schools had to submit this reopening plan, and Tech's included something like that it would cost $13 million for the year just to implement these safety features and the marketing campaign for jackets, protect jackets, and all of this stuff, when what I think that money should have gone to was professional development and paying faculty over the summer to be able to develop effective, good online courses. It actually takes a lot more work to implement an online course than it does an in-person course. I spend 3 times more teaching my online courses than I do each of my courses for when I was teaching in person. And in most cases, there's no pedagogical support. These professors and adjuncts and graduate students who are teaching at these schools across the state are not trained in how to do online pedagogy. There's no guidance for them as to, how to implement an online class that is still equitable and fair, and it utilizes best practices and doesn't penalize students unnecessarily. So, I mean, Ethan, I think it's absurd that if an assignment is 3 minutes late, you get a 0 on it. And that's the kind of there needed to be a summer of planning and training and diverting the money that is being spent on pointless taping off of couch cushions in common spaces that needed to be actually directed towards the mission of these schools, which is educating students. And faculty could be doing it better, I know that, but they need the support for it, and they need the training for it, and they need material support for it. And it's just a complete lack of the correct priorities at a system level, I think.
So I guess kind of getting into another attendee question, kind of applies more to I guess on a federal level. What do you guys think about the incoming Biden administration? Will conditions improve under this incoming administration, both for education and also beyond?
Probably marginally better than the Trump administration, but I don't think he's gonna do the necessary changes that's gonna actually fix the problem. Because, for example, I remember before he said he was committed to doing forgiving student debt. Then recently his plan said that he's going to forgive $10,000 of non-federally administered student debt, and that's really bad because that means only private loans, and 92% of loans for student loans is owned federally. So literally 8% of people only get from that loan will only get that benefit, and then after that it's means tested too. So it's for the economically disadvantaged. So whatever that means. So if I'm just basing his plan for students and faculty for COVID off of that, I don't think he's gonna fix the problem at its root with any big structural changes to the system.
I mean, Biden is a closeted conservative. He's already putting in people who are conservative to his team. I think that he's marginally better than outright blatant fascism, but I think that we can definitely do a lot better, and that starts at the local level.
I think you touched on an amazing point. You did this earlier as well when you were talking about, the most effective things that we can do as individuals is to organize, we can agitate, and we can educate. These are 3 things that are of utmost importance at which we can do to, the national will respond the way it will, but we can affect our communities around us and our direct resources effectively this way. Also, one of my friends told me I have this Pink Floyd background on. I did not know this joining, so I apologize for that. I also forgot to say that I am a Org Bureau, which is a leadership role at Georgia State's YDSA.
I mean, I think we all recognize that Biden is going to be able to accomplish very little if Republicans retain control of the Senate. And if that occurs, the only way he can accomplish anything is probably through executive action, which means he can undo everything Trump has done through executive action and maybe do some things on his own, but he'll be boxed in a significant manner. So I just want to remind you that things could be somewhat different if the 2 Democratic candidates for Senate actually make it through and win and get as many votes as Biden did. Because if that would occur, then thanks to Kamala Harris's tie-breaking vote, Biden could actually do things. And then it's up for us to push him to do the right things. He himself was not for example, having free public education at a post-secondary level. like Bernie Sanders was. But maybe we can push him towards that. He wasn't for completely eliminating student debt, as Bernie Sanders was, but maybe he can be pushed further along that road. But of course, pushing him is not going to achieve anything unless these two people in Georgia manage to make it to the Senate. So I urge you all to take seriously that race, even if those candidates are not as progressive as you might like them to be. Nonetheless, there will be a difference if Mitch McConnell rules the Senate as opposed to if he does not. And I think it's worthwhile in the few weeks that are left to try to do what one can to ensure that that doesn't happen, which is to make sure you and your friends and colleagues vote in the runoff.
Yeah, these Senate seats are going to be essential. And there was a popular online streamer in Atlanta this weekend trying to help with getting Warnock and Ossoff elected. And I really encourage people to reach out to media and really try to push this, because just talking with them today, I was able to exchange emails, and hopefully we can get them involved with MADSA to help build more of a presence for these people, because this really is one of the most important things, and it's on Georgia's hands, right? Like, we can literally affect this with our vote. So I'd encourage, like, please just tell people, go vote.
Yes, absolutely. And you're right. It really is. It comes down to Georgia. And that's something that would affect the Board of Regents and affect all USG schools, and just the political climate of our state also. So as we're wrapping up here, this has been a fantastic discussion. And we've covered a lot of points that are really at the heart of this decision to reopen for spring. Thinking towards next semester, what are some of the ways that we as students and as members of the working class can combat private interests within the university system?
I'd once again turn to coalitions, right? Like, what's really great is so many of these other schools have YDSAs. SCAD doesn't, so we're trying to put that together right now, but that's literally one of the best things that we can do right now, because a lot of people simply just don't know this stuff, right? And they would be mad about it too if they found out. So I think just sharing it is, like, we can't do anything if people don't know, right? So yeah, once again, building coalitions and sharing with the community, I think, is what's gonna make tangible change.
Building on that, join the union. There's quite a few UCW members here, including myself, and they've been doing protests at UGA that have gotten some traction in, like, the school newspaper, that have reached a lot of people on campus. It's super important. They're doing really good work, and organizing the actual workers at UGA and people who are the stakeholders in UGA's and all of USG's responses is the most important thing. So making sure that we all have those coalitions, like Olivia was saying, in our organizing.
Also to add to that, it's important to do like mutual aid and community work, for example. And also like for homeless students, like no one talks about them at all. No one talks about like how badly homeless students are hurting right now, especially since it's like winter, it's COVID, they have no jobs, and they still are trying to learn. They have no support. So like, if y'all can like make a mutual aid fund for like the local homeless community in your schools, that'd be a great help to them too.
I think when you talk about coalition building, it's important that coalition building occur around a set of system-wide demands that can be advocated by both students, faculty, and staff, and with the support of the communities that are affected by what happens on campus. But I think one should think always of system-wide demands, because we're dealing with a state-run university system, and none of the local administrations can do much of anything on their own. But what needs to be done really applies at every campus. So I think it's important for all of the local organizations, or all of you, to think of what are the kind of things that we need to demand for a safe, humane reopening. And I think obviously that would involve testing of everyone frequently, paid leave, contact tracing that really is organized, and responsible quarantining. And we have to think of childcare and various other things that are important for anyone related to the university community. So I think after this event, all of us should be thinking about what are those type of demands that we need to put on the table and push for them, if not before, certainly when the new term begins.
I would also say from a really practical standpoint that so important to be researching what's going on at your school, your individual school, because you're going to know it the best, right? So like Olivia did, look for how much are people getting paid, so that those demands can be informed, and like find some way to archive this information, whatever it is that you find, right? Because if you can't then share it with everyone, then it's going to be a lot less effective. So whatever it is that looks like for you, and whatever your skill set is, I encourage everyone to think about their own very particular skill set and what they can bring to the table in terms of compiling this information, and having a record of our lived experiences and our friends and our community members' lived experiences through this, so that we can be effective when we set out to start demanding things and start doing actions in our coalitions.
And I just wanted to add, for anyone who's like interested in doing more research, like a simple Google Doc is enough, you know, a Google Doc and a Google search. Like it is pretty easy to find this stuff if you just look for it, and compiling it is such a like easy and effective way, like Dr. Edwards said about building like a general sense of like collective knowledge, right, of like what the actual things that we're fighting for are.
I wanted to apologize first of all. McGarrett was kind enough to invite me to this panel, and I completely spaced it until 20 minutes ago. I'm sure you all had a lot to say, so I regret having missed so much of it.
Would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah. I'm Joe Fu. I'm a math professor and member of the United Campus Workers of Georgia Union at University of Georgia. So anyway, I've been following the UGA and larger USG response to the pandemic crisis for a while, and with some dismay, you know. So I guess, So I guess. You know, my scatterbrainedness about this event indicates how hard it is for me to keep a lot of ideas in my head. So for that reason, I guess I sort of developed this line of argument that's very, very simple, and to me very, very very fundamental, very foundational, and which is, you know, basically that you know, in the USG particularly, with the possible exception of Georgia Tech, the testing is just laughably inadequate, you know, and furthermore the administration's attitude towards sharing of information is frightening, and you know, they're so miserly with it. I mean, I could multiply stories about this kind of thing, most of which are a little bit tedious, but maybe you could turn on a little bit of technicality sometimes. But Anyway, yeah, just the yeah, the death of their commitment to keeping the community in the dark has been really striking, I would say. When cornered, they'll do things, of course, but you just have to hunt them down on every single point somehow. And then the larger points remain. Not enough testing, not enough reporting of testing. The contact tracing, we don't know, is a black box. And I guess, and oh yeah, and then my favorite, which is that nobody will in USG at any level will say under what conditions retreat from face to face might occur. Which again is like I just can't. I can't. It's comical. It's comically insulting, I would say, to the communities involved. And I don't know. So I guess my messaging on the subject has been based around those principles. And I was just reflecting on it. I have this naive faith maybe in logic or something, or the power of reason, or the inevitability of the compelling power of reason. I don't know. So it seems a naivety, but I guess I feel like if we could bring we're justified. I mean, we're justified around the USG in taking whatever steps we may personally find necessary to keep ourselves and the people close to us healthy. That's whatever their policies are. And I guess I feel fully confident trumpeting that in as public way as I possibly can. And if they want to engage a conversation around it, I'm very happy. I'd be very happy to do that. And so anyway, I keep thinking, I guess back a few weeks ago, we were, some of us had some, had some thought that perhaps sort of radical labor action might occur, and perhaps in some sense it has at UGA. It seems like people have taken their security into their own hands from what I see of the emptiness of campus. But anyway, so we shall see what happens going into the spring. I don't know what they're really going to try to do as far as forcing in-class attendance. That's disconcerting. So anyway, that's to my knowledge, and that's my stance, and hope to find ways to